All right, so what we are doing today is, always dreaming of shed hunting, but really we're out on the land today and picking apart what's happening right now as it is end of February. We know deer don't really hang out here during the winter, and there's quite a bit of land and quite a bit of cover and stuff, and you always wonder, like, well, why aren't they even hanging out here at all? And so that's what I am doing, is picking it apart and trying to figure out what's happening. And big thing I've been really observing as I've been driving around, going to properties, and is we have this perception that when we plant thermal trees, basically planting conifers as like thermal cover for deer, we have this perception that we're going to plant these areas, it's actually going to provide thermal cover for deer, they're going to use it during all parts of the season. Well, in fact, it's kind of counterintuitive sometimes, depending on how you have that designed on your land, because especially down here in open country farmland areas, and you have these little pockets where you're going to plant these rows of trees, as whether it's wind cover, screen cover, thermal cover, whatever. A lot of times they're used for screening so you can get in and out of stands, but also the idea is that deer are going to use it, or wildlife are going to use it. Well, what's interesting with these open country areas is that wind pulls off of those open fields, and you're thinking, well, that's going to allow screening and cover for deer. Well, it actually captures all the snow. And so I'll show you here what's happening. But look, I'm already diving. This is already 10 to 20 yards into this like edge of timber. And you can see the snow is almost over my head in some areas here. And during the fall, it's like super thick and super great like cover, but you would think it would actually provide more cover during the winter, and in fact it actually makes it worse, and it snows out the wildlife and the deer in a lot of these areas. So that's a big tip that I have in terms of like how we design properties and how to make properties better, is really think of how the results are going to be depending on how your land sets up. And I never really thought of it much, but I was like, wow, all of these like areas people are planning, thinking they're going to have these awesome thermal covers, are actually making their land somewhat worse in a way. So what I'm kind of picturing of here is when we go in and plant more trees and hit certain areas for screening, cover, adding habitat for wildlife, we're gonna make sure we set it up in a way so even if these plantings are like blocking a lot of wind, capturing a lot of the snow, that there is going to be plenty of cover beyond it so wildlife can use it. And so what you see here behind this wall of snow is it drastically tapers off into basically nothing out here. But the part of why they don't live here is that, plus there really isn't a ton of good cover to really make it last through the winter for deer and like have enough food here for the winter. In all actualities, I feel like this land could easily help a couple dozen deer during the winter. So now it's like, how are we going to add more cover and add more food all year round? And now I'm about 30 yards behind that snowdrift inside the timber. And there is some pockets in here that they could really get out of the elements, but it's still pretty cold, pretty nasty right in here on a pretty mild day. So a lot of spots when you're seeing deer sign during the winter is you'll find these pockets of a bunch of sign. They'll usually be on the far downwind of like the cold front winds, like let's say a northwest wind in this area of Minnesota. Like they're gonna be on the far southeast corner of those woodlots or those cover areas. And it's amazing when you get in those pockets, it's like quiet. You can hear things. You feel warm because you just get the sun rays soaking in on you, and you don't feel any wind coming through. And there's usually less snow, and it's just a lot more feasible for deer to survive winters and, you know, stay there all winter. But you got to also have browse in there. But more to come. You might notice that I've got these sweet glasses on. All I had in the truck today, but we're rocking them. These are pretty sweet. Let's do it. Hunting Land Mike here. We're really looking at the land today and trying to figure out ways we can improve the land to better the habitat all year and in the fall. And when we're really targeting better habitat later in the season, like late December, I'm kind of trying to get a synopsis right now, this is end of February, of what is it like on the land? Why are deer not here? And it's pretty obvious walking around here. There's really no browse. Just tons of snow in the areas that you would think there would be deer. And we'll dive into that in a little bit. So that's what we're doing today. I mean, it would be awesome to pick up a shed, but I know the deer really haven't been in here for a month, so that's all right. Stay tuned. Okay, so as we are developing the property to have better screen cover and that's kind of big for this property, is that we are doing lots of projects to improve the screening cover and the actual habitat cover that'll be good for food and thermals for deer and other wildlife. And we did some screening plantings, really basic stuff with Egyptian wheat, just to experiment. I'll throw a picture up here as we walk. But that Egyptian wheat, it's end of February, it's up on top of a open hill, still has almost a full row out of 3 rows that are still standing upright and 8-9 feet tall. So I think we'll probably try to do some more of that. It's cool to see that had enough rigidity through tons of high winds here in Minnesota, and it'd be fun to try out, actually use it in a screening application purposely, and get about 5 to 8 rows in there, if not a few more, and cover some of these spots so they're not just wide open to everything. Because what we're seeing is we're just trying to access a stand or hunting location, and the deer will see you because they're in another food plot that's in sight, or they're in an area they can just see you, and they can see you a mile away before you get there. So that's what we're trying to really improve, getting in and out of the property without spooking deer. A big issue on this property. So we got many years ahead with that, but it's going to come along and it's going to be really cool. And that's in an area where it doesn't seem like it's going to be just epic land for all times of the year. So we're transforming it. Another project we did that I was just observing as I was doing my walk today is a pine planting, and I can see the tops of the trees through the snow right now, and they're doing pretty good. They look fairly healthy. There's a few that might have gotten sprayed by the farmer's sprayer, but we kind of knew something like that would happen at some point. With these winds out here, it just happens. But we're going to add a few more dimensions to our screening and cover this year to make it awesome for the future. So we'll be adding some diversity to these areas we planted pines. We'll implement more of the Egyptian wheat in some food plot areas to screen open sides and make better access to stands. Wow, I lost my breath. And yeah, we'll be adding diversity, adding some more conifer type plantings, and then also some browse plantings in key areas. So we're adding a food and cover component to it as well. So we'll probably target like dogwood and some maples, and might even consider some screening trees that'd be really good, as like some willows and dogwood as well. But we also want to consider, when we're doing those screenings, do you attracted to those areas, and pick varieties of plants and trees that will accommodate that. Because if it's an area where you're planning on walking a ton, not advisable to like make it super attractive for deer to come there and eat and spend time, because now you're just attracting them to a spot you're going to spook them. Okay, another thing I want to start implementing out on this property is that we are starting to design some of our access trails and places we're driving to regularly, and potentially rerouting them so we're not constantly driving through areas that we're trying to attract deer. So as you can see behind me, this is one of our main access roads here, and it goes right into the food plot here. This is the meat market, we call it, and I think we need to kind of reroute it and add more cover to it so we get a dimension away, a level away from coming through and spooking this plot regularly during the daylight with even four-wheelers or walking or whatever. Just trying to reduce that as much as we can, and then accessing it certain ways. You're not educating deer and alerting deer that you're coming in, and because these areas are being designed and adding food, so we do get a lot of daylight activity on the farm, and we don't want to dig ourselves in a hole and go the other direction and actually start spooking them to nighttime activity. So more to come.